You ever notice how trouble shows up right when you're finally relaxing? I'd been running shifts all week at the county sheriff's office, and that Saturday morning, I swore I wasn't moving from my recliner. Coffee steaming, boots off, TV remote in hand, peace at last. Or so I thought. That peace lasted all of 5 minutes before someone nearly beat my front door off its hinges. Heavy, aggressive pounding, not the kind you hear from a neighbor borrowing sugar, but the kind that makes your gut tighten like you're about to be raided. I muttered, "What now?" Set my mug down, and walked over. Before we dive in, comment which country you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The second I opened the door, I almost spit out my coffee laughing. Two men stood there in the most pathetic excuse for law enforcement uniforms I'd ever seen. Ill-fitting polyester shirts, clip-on badges that looked like they came from a costume shop, and belts that didn't hold a single real tool of the trade. The taller one, a middle-aged guy with a thick mustache and mirrored sunglasses, puffed his chest out like he just stepped off a movie set. "Sir, step outside immediately. You're under HOA arrest." I blinked. "I'm sorry. HOA what?" "HOA arrest," he repeated, flashing that toy badge in my face. His partner, shorter, nervously clutching a clipboard, nodded seriously like this was the most official thing in the world. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "The HOA has an enforcement division now?" "That's right," Mustache Man said proudly. "We've been authorized to enforce neighborhood ordinances and detain non-compliant residents." The absurdity almost made me choke. I'd been in law enforcement long enough to spot a fraud the second I saw one, and these two were glowing neon signs of wannabe tough guys. The shorter one flipped open his clipboard with great ceremony. "You have been cited for violations, unapproved mailbox design, and unauthorized patio furniture." I glanced toward my yard. Standard black mailbox, two Adirondack chairs on the porch, both perfectly legal under city code. "You're kidding me. My mailbox? It doesn't conform to the HOA's update aesthetic guidelines," the clipboard man said. "And my chairs?" I asked, pointing. "They're unapproved," he stammered, clearly making it up as he went along. I rubbed my jaw, fighting a smirk. "So let me get this straight. You're here to arrest me over a mailbox and two chairs?" Mustache Man stepped forward, snapping. "This isn't a joke. Non-compliance is a serious matter. Turn around, hands behind your back." That was when I knew playtime was over. I wasn't just a homeowner they could bully. I was the sheriff of this county. And these clowns had just knocked on the wrong door. The mustache guy snapped his fingers, and the shorter one pulled out a cheap pair of handcuffs, the kind you'd buy at a flea market. "Turn around," he barked again. "Last chance before we use force." I raised an eyebrow. "Force? With what? Those plastic bracelets?" They didn't like that. Mustache Man squared his shoulders, his tone dripping with fake authority. "You think this is funny? The HOA takes compliance very seriously. You're coming with us, one way or another." I sighed, like a teacher dealing with two failing students. "Tell you what, why don't you tell me where this so-called compliance center is, and maybe I'll humor you." The shorter one muttered quickly, "We can't disclose locations to civilians." That did it. I couldn't hold back my laugh. "Civilians? Son, you're standing on my porch trying to arrest the sheriff. Do you realize how deep you've just buried yourselves?" Their smug faces faltered for the first time, but instead of backing down, Mustache Man tried to double down. He lunged forward, waving the cuffs. That was his mistake. In one smooth motion, I caught his wrist, twisted it, and slammed him against the hood of his own car. He yelped like a kid caught stealing cookies. His partner froze, clipboard clutched to his chest like a shield. If you're enjoying this HOA story so far, like and subscribe, because the story is only going to get better. I leaned down next to Mustache Man's ear. "Here's the difference between you and me. When I make an arrest, it's legal. You're looking at impersonating law enforcement, attempted unlawful detention, and about a half dozen other charges." Right then, the sweet sound of sirens cut through the neighborhood. Two sheriff cruisers skidded to a stop in my driveway, lights flashing red and blue. Neighbors started peeking out their doors and pulling out their phones, whispering like they were watching a live episode of Cops. Deputy Carter, my right-hand man, stepped out first. He took one look at me, pinning Mustache Man against the car, and shook his head. "Boss, I leave you alone for one Saturday, and you're already wrestling grown men in Halloween costumes?" I grinned. "They were trying to arrest me. Figured I'd return the favor." Carter walked over, plucking the shiny badge right off Mustache Man's chest. He flipped it over, snorted, and held it up for the neighbors to see. "Y'all see this? Says HOA compliance officer. Not recognized by the county, the state, or anybody with half a brain." The crowd chuckled, but Carter's tone hardened as he turned back to the two wannabes. "Let's see some IDs. Real ones this time." The shorter one fumbled nervously before handing over his wallet. Carter flipped it open, then raised an eyebrow. "Jake, you're gonna love this. Not only are they not cops, neither of them is even a licensed security guard. I let Mustache Man up just enough so he could face me. Looks like you boys have been running a scam, and now you're done. Deputy Carter cuffed Mustache Man while I kept an eye on Clipboard Boy. The neighbors had gathered now, filming every second like vultures circling roadkill. Clipboard Boy stammered, This is a misunderstanding. We were authorized. The HOA board approved this operation." Carter shot him a look colder than a January morning. "Son, the only people who can authorize a law enforcement action are sworn officers of the state. And newsflash, the HOA isn't the state." I stepped closer, folding my arms. "You thought you could play dress up, march onto my land, and pretend you had authority. That ends today." Clipboard Boy's bravado cracked. "But Karen from the board told us we had full compliance powers. She said we could arrest violators." Carter barked a short laugh. "Arrest violators? That's impersonation of an officer, a felony in this state. You just admitted it too, on camera in front of half the neighborhood." The shorter man's knees buckled. He dropped the clipboard like it weighed a ton. The neighbors murmured, some laughing, others shaking their heads. A few were already whispering about lawsuits. Before long, another cruiser pulled up, this time carrying Sergeant Morales, who oversaw community crimes. She took one look at the scene and started writing notes. "All right, here's the deal. Both of you are under arrest for criminal trespass, impersonating law enforcement, and attempted unlawful detention. You're also facing conspiracy charges since you acted together under a fake authority." Mustache Man sputtered. "Wait, you can't charge us for all that." Morales leveled him with a stare. "Watch me." As the cuffs clicked shut on Clipboard Boy, I finally let out a breath. It wasn't anger that drove me anymore. It was relief. Relief that these clowns weren't going to come swaggering onto anyone else's porch again. But the fallout didn't stop there. 2 days later, word spread like wildfire. The county prosecutor was filing charges. The HOA board, in full panic, tried to distance themselves from the stunt, but it was too late. Emails surfaced. The board president had encouraged these two to enforce compliance by any means necessary. That little phrase was enough to sink the whole ship. Civil suits piled on next. Neighbors who had been harassed by fake citations and threats of compliance arrests came forward. A class action lawsuit formed, dragging the HOA into court for fraud, harassment, and unlawful intimidation. And me? I filed my own lawsuit: trespass, attempted kidnapping, and emotional distress. My lawyer barely had to lift a finger. The evidence spoke louder than anything else. Security footage, deputy reports, neighbor videos, all neatly packaged. By the time the gavel came down, the HOA had been stripped of its charter, the president banned from holding office in any community association again. The two fake cops, convicted. Fines, probation, and permanent records that would follow them for the rest of their lives. I stood on my porch, weeks later, coffee in hand, watching a "for sale" sign go up in front of the ex-president's house. Poetic justice. The HOA's bullies learned the hard way that the law isn't a game, and my home will never bow to fraud.